To apply what I learned from this movie, I'd like to begin this video with a land acknowledgement. My white self wrote this review from my bed with its white sheets, and I'm delivering it in my bedroom with its white door inside of a white house that was built on land that used to belong to the Erie people, until they all got wiped out by the Iroquois. Iroquois? No, then it sounds like I'm saying they were French, and for that I actually do apologize. Then that land got taken by the Lenape. Then the white man conquered it, and nobody else took it from them because they were technologically advanced, well-civilized, literate, and had developed systems of government to help protect their land. The white man stole the land because of white power or something? I don't know. But then they named their baseball team the Indians and put a Barrio Tacos, Condado can suck it, down the street from the stadium so the natives' descendants thanked the white man and enjoyed getting their groceries from Heinen's rather than hoping their prayers to Mother Corn would be answered, and she would allow them to avoid starvation long enough for another tribe to destroy them and still not invent ballpark mustard. And that's how you do an anti-racist land acknowledgement. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about this movie, The Conservative Borat. Kind of. By the way, this is a mockumentary, so it's really pretty difficult to talk about it in any substantive way without talking spoilers, so there's your warning. What you see is what you get from the trailer and the clips that they leaked. It's kind of What is a Woman, but this time focused on race and racism. This time, Matt Walsh is going undercover with slightly different glasses, a really bad wig, and the exact same beard and voice. Not surprisingly, most DEI proponents must not have wanted to take a filmed interview with Matt Walsh after What is a Woman. But the fact that none of these people recognized Matt Walsh, who has a pretty distinctive deep voice, just because he put on a bad wig is crazy. Like, it's clearly a wig. That should raise some suspicions, no? And these people almost assuredly despise Matt Walsh. My theory is that these people who detest him have also probably never had any sort of experience with him outside of Twitter/X. They've probably never listened to an episode of his podcast or gone to a live speaking event of his, just read his tweets and tweets others have posted about him. And because they've never actually put a face to the name of the man they hate so much, they don't recognize him when he's sitting right in front of them. Honestly, I doubt he would have even needed the wig for most of the interactions. Walsh goes on his satirical journey into becoming a certified DEI anti-racist. I know you want to hear what kind of insane things are highlighted in this movie, and we'll get there, but first I do have to talk about the actual writing because that's what I do on this channel. You can skip ahead using the chapters. And subscribe while you're at it. His journey starts with attending a white grief support group, which is a real thing that people pay money for. In this case, the woman leading it apparently charged $30,000 to lead it. Perhaps the best decision they made with this movie was disclosing how much each anti-racist or DEI expert charged for their time. After some members of the group realized that the guy calling himself Steven, who just got up to go to the cry room, is actually Matt Walsh, they start to fear for their safety, so they kick him out and even call the cops on him. Yes, you heard that right. These people, including the woman whose $30,000 fee Matt Walsh contributed to, said they feared for their physical safety from a podcaster. Because you know how terrifying they are. I know when I walk down the street, mothers pushing strollers cross to the other side, and I hear them whisper to their infants, "Look at that physically imposing man who spends 15 hours a day behind a computer screen." So Matt Walsh dons his Clark Kent disguise that apparently gets him into wherever he wants and starts doing the work. He pays $2,300 to get certified in DEI. Yeah, you apparently have to shell out over $2,000 to be able to say you understand a bunch of racial Marxism propaganda. To say you understand the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the pervasive racism that exists at the fundamental level in America. To give you some perspective on how great a grift that is, and it is the greatest grift in America today, let me give you some info on how much it costs to become a licensed electrical engineer, something I'm on my way towards. It involves taking 2 exams. The first, the FE exam, costs $225 to sit for. The second, the PE exam, costs $375 to sit for. That comes out to $600, or 1/4 the price of a DEI certification to become a licensed electrical engineer, which typically brings with it a 10 to 20% pay increase and the authority to stamp blueprints as ready to be built. Even if you opt to take a 6-month course to prep for the PE exam, it still only brings your total cost to $1,800. So let's just make that clear. My old boss greenlit the construction of a $2.5 billion solar panel manufacturing plant I helped design, which literally uses as much electricity as a small town. The financial barrier to entry for him to have the authority to do that is lower than that of getting a DEI certification. Yeah, our country doesn't have messed up priorities at all. From there, Matt Walsh goes around speaking to people about how racist they are and petitioning people in Washington, D.C. to change the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument, doing his best impression of an anti-racist advocate. And he further explores the various grifts that other anti-racist activists peddle, leading to an interview with the famed Robin DiAngelo, who he manages to dupe into giving him back $30 of the $15,000 he shelled out for an interview with her in the form of a reparation to his black producer. He also poses a question to her about a white person over or under smiling at a black coworker in the hallway, and her eventual solution is to just have the white and black person take separate hallways. That is a real thing, she says. And it all culminates in Matt Walsh teaching his own course on DEI. Of course, so ludicrous that even some of the willing attendees do realize it's ridiculous and just walk out, but a surprising number don't. In fact, the most shockingly despicable moment in the whole movie comes during that fake course, which I'll talk about later, and he even goes on local TV morning shows to promote said course. People keep likening this movie to Borat. Kind of fair, but it's not a perfect comparison. Firstly, Borat wasn't talking about actual cultural movements in America the way this movie does. This movie's a lot more serious. Secondly, Sacha Baron Cohen is so much more outrageous than Matt Walsh. He's willing to go way past the line. Whereas in Borat, while there was the element of the unwitting subjects making themselves the butt of the jokes, Sacha himself was even funnier in how he was responding to everything and being a fish out of water. Matt Walsh is funny. Don't get me wrong, he's got that deadpan humor down and he can lead people into the situations he wants them in, but in a couple of the scenes, it feels like he's doing too much manipulating and the subjects aren't a part of the joke as much as they're part of the setting of Matt's joke. It leads to the humor sometimes being kind of forced. There are also aspects of the film that remind you that it wasn't written by necessarily great writers. They had no idea how to end this movie, and they include scenes that make you wonder why they thought that needed to be there. They take a solid 10 minutes in the middle of the film to basically stop everything they're doing and recreate the Jussie Smollett hate crime hoax as he had told the story. Funny? Sure. I mean, not nearly as funny as Dave Chappelle's bit about it.
He was the victim of a racist and homophobic attack. You see, Jussie Smollett is gay and he is black, not just French.
But also super unnecessary and kind of out of nowhere. They kind of have a story they're following, but too often they don't actually follow it. Either have a story or don't, but just pick one and stick with it. Alright, now that my points about the writing and the overall structure of the film have been made, let's talk about some of the most insane things you see and hear while watching this movie, as well as what the impact of this movie might be. Right off the bat, the first woman Walsh talks to reveals that to live a life of quote-unquote anti-racism is to always be in the wrong as a white person. He and the woman talk about their daughter's favorite Disney princesses. The woman is very disappointed that her 4-year-old daughter is gravitating towards white princesses. Funny how the same crowd that claims representation is important often doesn't think that white people should favor fictional characters that look like them. But on the flip side, Matt's daughter really likes Moana, but if she dresses like Moana for Halloween, that's cultural appropriation.
She is choosing a white princess over princesses of color.
Have you talked to her about that?
All the time.
Do I go and buy the Pacific Islander native attire for my white 3-year-old?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
So if you like a white princess, you're a racist little girl. But if you like a Pacific Islander princess, you're also a racist little girl.
Okay.
There's a common theme in this movie from the DEI crowd that white people can't cry. White tears are exploitative, I think is something that at least 2 experts said. I can only assume, I don't know, black chicks don't get out of speeding tickets as often as white chicks do. As Matt goes up to random people on the street, he has some more interesting conversations with normal people. And their responses range from, "You're an idiot for asking these questions, just stop caring about race," to a master's student dissing white culture. And the instructor of the DEI course Walsh takes to become certified tried to explain that, and I quote, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't see the true problems in race in America. Sure. While Martin Luther King Jr. was delivering one of the greatest speeches in American history to advance the cause of ending segregation in America, he really should have been focusing on the way that white people smile at black people. Walsh talks to a bunch of black Southern Baptists. By the way, nicest people in America, those Southern Baptists. They all just talked about the Bible, the love of God, how we're all one, and how America's a great place. And they weren't exactly living in penthouses. But maybe the most interesting person he talks to is when he goes to a biker bar that legitimately had a Confederate flag on the wall. While there, he talks to a guy who, shall we say, has an interesting family history. I'll just read you the quotes from him I wrote down. My dad, grandfather, great-grandfather were all Klansmen. If you want to get rid of racism, stop labeling people as black or white. I feel like Morgan Freeman said something along those lines once.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
Quoting the Klansman descendant again, if you treat people right, they treat you right. It's about what's in your heart. Pretty incredible. A dude raised by members of the most notorious white supremacist terrorist organization ever, the guys that lynched blacks and burned crosses, has a better idea of how to actually not be racist than the girl in grad school. One of the wildest scenes is when Matt Walsh crashes a dinner where these two women charge white women $5,000 to basically yell at them for being white. It's one of the weirder kinks I've heard, but alright. There were so many insane quotes in this scene that my girlfriend had to remind me of some that I missed taking notes on, but here goes with some of them. Republicans are Nazis. Naturally, everyone knows that. White people need their guns to protect themselves from black people. Weird, you mispronounced the government. The entire system has to burn. This country has to burn. It's not worth saving. Really? Okay. Then what are you doing? Leave. And if the USA isn't worth saving, what country is? You gonna go to one of the Middle Eastern countries where they marry off 8-year-old girls and don't let women go to school? Or are you gonna point to what every whiny little brat in America does and say, look at the Scandinavian countries, they're so great? They're also the most segregated countries in the world. Finland is made up of 93% Finns, 6% Swedes, and less than 1% others. And I think it's safe to assume the other 1% aren't all Ethiopian. And Sweden finally started letting immigrants in. Oh wait, they're trying to pay them to leave. So I would love to know what countries she would point to as systems that shouldn't be burned. The last two stories I took note of are the two most insane. One shows just how much money there is to be made in racial victimhood in this country, and the other is basically a toned-down version of the Stanford prison experiment. If you don't know what that is, you should read about it. It's wild. In the first one, Matt Walsh had to pay a woman $50,000 to tell her story. Now, before I tell you what the story was, let's take a moment to acknowledge that number. This no-name woman is charging $50,000 for an interview.
Now let's all agree that that's a lot.
That's over half the cost of my entire 4-year college education. It's more than the average American makes in a year. For an interview? This woman charged more than the MSRP of an Audi A5 to talk about how her children were racially victimized by, ready for this? A Sesame Place mascot. Oh no. How terrifying. What did Big Bird call those little black kids? Did he nail their hands to a post? Did he enslave them? Nope. Apparently this mascot didn't give her two kids a high five. Your kids not getting a high five from Snuffleupagus or something apparently merits you being invited on morning talk shows and charging $50,000 for 10-minute interviews. And that makes you a victim? Are you kidding me? I'd let Snuffy do unspeakable things to me with that trunk of his for that kind of easy income. Oh, and the best part is, to this day, she doesn't know who was in the mascot costume. So it may not have even been a white person. For all she knows, it could have been the kid's dad just avoiding paying child support. And if you found that joke offensive, Feel free to tell your story on any morning talk show that will have you on. Speaking of offensive jokes, that leads us to the second and final story. While Matt is leading his DEI scam course, well, I guess I should say his scam DEI scam course, he tells the participants that they should confront their racist relatives and brings in his Uncle Frank to do just that. He recalls a fake story of when Uncle Frank had made a racist joke at the dinner table in the past. Now, you may be wondering what that racist joke was. Well, if you think that I'm going to repeat a racist joke on my channel, then you are absolutely correct. Okay, so Uncle Frank had said, "What's the difference between a Mexican father and a picnic table?" And all together, class, a picnic table can support a family of 5. Not super original, Uncle Frank. Pretty sure I heard that one back in 3rd grade. But Matt pretends to get very angry at Uncle Frank and scold him for making that joke. It's worth noting, Matt claims Uncle Frank made that joke 20 years ago. He then asks his course participants, who haven't left, if there's anything they would like to say to Uncle Frank. And the willingness of 2 of the women to curse out a complete stranger for, in actuality, not making an unoriginal, racially insensitive joke 20 years ago was astonishing. Oh, and I didn't even mention the best part. Uncle Frank is in a wheelchair. These 2 women cursed out an old, decrepit, wheelchair-bound, possibly dementia-ridden. I mean, he's basically Joe Biden for a joke made 2 decades ago. Like, they just assume he hasn't changed. 20 years ago, I was 5 years old getting held back in preschool. Would these people hold anything I said then against me? I don't see why they wouldn't. It was incredible. It was the only time in the entire movie I actually felt speechless. So, what will the effect of this movie be? I really don't think it will have even half the impact of What is a Woman, which exposed hospitals and schools' treatment of children regarding gender-affirming care, among other things. This one is, first of all, not as well done. It doesn't explore the DEI industry so much as just relentlessly mock it. And second of all, I think a lot more people already knew what DEI is all about. If you work for a big enough corporation, you've almost certainly gotten at least a taste of it. So this movie, I don't think will have any real cultural significance. And that's fine. It's likely not the goal. The goal was probably to just make a profitable movie. And on its $3 million budget, I would guess it's already there. Now, usually I stick to reviewing the movie and mocking stupid people. But if you've watched this far, maybe you'd like to know why I'm so anti-DEI. And why I think this anti-racist grift is potentially so dangerous. Because I get like 5 comments per video, max, at this point. And even still, I get people angry that I even mentioned DEI. At one point in the movie, a woman spouts that all white culture is buying and stealing things. Which made me consider, for the first time in my life, everything that was pioneered by white people, including sports like basketball and football, automobiles, air travel, alternating current electricity, DNA science, the foundations of physics, penicillin, vaccines for polio and smallpox, computer science, the internet, motion pictures, the smartphone. I could keep going, but here's the point. Never until then had I thought of those people and their innovations in terms of the people being white. Because who cares? Nikola Tesla didn't, for lack of a better term, invent alternating current because he was a white man. He invented it because he was a freaking genius. And I don't get any points because he had the same skin color as me. In a country like ours with so much racial diversity, I think you need as many people as possible to not be tribal about their race. Because tribalism leads to violence. Polling shows that the vast majority of white people don't care about their racial identity. I would say that's a good thing, because that number means that automatically, without even considering any other races, over half the country doesn't care about their race. But if you wanted white people to develop that racial pride that could lead to some actual serious conflicts in the country, I can't think of a better way to do it than by constantly telling them their race sucks.